We don't have to scrub it later. No, you're fine. You're not.
I'm like right
You're not in
now. I
the
was
way.
like staring right at it.
Okay, you're underneath it. So.
It's like you can see like pink motion.
All right, so we are in Exodus 23. Excuse me. Sometimes it's tough to do this after eating, especially when you haven't eaten since 23. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because remember, if you remember from the last time, we were talking about some of these.
Sundry laws.
Yeah, these laws that jumped from seducing virgins to not allowing a sorceress to live, and all those things.
Yes.
I missed the good stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So those are there. We talked about also, and it really does deal with today. We talked about back in 21 of God, how He views homosexuality and those things. So as Christians, we're to have one mindset about that. Unfortunately, right now we're in a situation where people all over the world, the Church of England has just decided that they agree with the Pope, who said it's not a crime to be a homosexual. And when our country was instituted, that was actually one of the things. George Washington, if it was found out, as he put it, if there were any sodomites within the camp, get out. You're not welcome here. And that was the way that he viewed it. He had a very biblical understanding of what it was, because he didn't just see it as pointing out the one thing. He saw it as an immoral thing, but he also saw it as a morality issue with the people, how it would corrupt. And so it was one of those things that the Church of England has decided that they're going to go along with the Pope, and they're actually condemning people for taking a biblical stance on it. There is in Canada, our great, the great communist nation of Canada, a young boy, 16, 17 years old, high schooler, in a Catholic school, was kicked out. Why? Because he holds to a biblical view of marriage and nothing else. He holds to a biblical view of gender and nothing else. He's in a Catholic school, a Roman Catholic school, and they kicked him out. Why? Well, because somebody might be offended by what he believes. So,
sounds like they had more non-believers, shall we say, attending that school than believers.
This is one of the things that, if you remember when we went through our church history, whenever the universities were established, they were established for actually molding and making pastors, apologists, theologians. That was the purpose. That was Harvard. That was Princeton. That was all these very big name schools. That was the origination of them. And what have they fallen into? Communism. This is what happens. Because they get the administrations and all those things. They begin to hire these people who are not Christians, and this is what happens. It begins to just multiply. And right now, the false Biden administration is trying to pass through laws that even if you are a Christian school, that you have to hire people who don't believe in God. They're trying to force us down. They're trying to change who we are. They're doing everything they can to take apart what we believe and what God has already established. And that's always been the fallen nature of man. It's just revealing its ugly self all over again. So I just thought I'd mention that in passing, because those are some things that are in the news, and that has to deal with us directly, because we need to be in prayer about that for our country, for the countries around us, and for the fact that the church is under attack, and it's only going to get worse as things go. And that's just one of the things we have to get used to, and just understand it, and just keep trusting God through it all, no matter what. So here in chapter 23, we're going to cover quite a bit of ground. We're going to start taking bigger chunks, missing things, because when we start moving past this, we're starting to, I don't want to get bogged down in a lot of the details, because there's a lot of detail, and they're important. A lot of them, we don't understand the full importance of them, and I think that's one of the reasons why we get bogged down. And they all have to do with the holiness of God and how He set these things up. Because we're going to be talking about the tabernacle and the importance of it. But here, what we're dealing with here is, I thought it was important to start with this, where we left off, because this has a direct outworking in the New Testament. And it's at one of the worst times in history. And it's one of the worst evils in history that we see playing itself out. And it was a breaking of these laws, and this one in particular here, where it says in verse 1 of chapter 23, says, "You shall not bear a false report. Do not join your hand with a wicked man to be a malicious witness. You shall not follow a multitude in doing evil, nor shall you testify in a dispute so as to turn aside after a multitude in order to pervert justice. Nor shall you be partial to a poor man in his dispute." Now, before we go on to what I wanted to do to show in the New Testament, that last part, verse 3, that's a very important thing. Nor shall you be partial to a poor man in his dispute. That is one of the things that is prevalent right now. Mm-hmm. And that's part of the leftist, that's part of the bleeding hearts, if you will. That's part of what they do. If you're poor, they think you should have more rights than anybody else. And that's a perversion of justice. While we want to be able to provide for them the best defense that they can have, at the same time, we can't be so swayed that we pervert justice by not being equal. You remember, have you ever seen the picture of Lady Justice?
She had a blindfold.
Yeah. What else does she have?
Hand balance scale.
Yes. In one hand, the scales, yeah. The other hand, the law. So, and she has to be blindfolded. Well, people have forgotten that, especially people on the left. They don't understand that anymore. But here, in verses 1 and 2, you have this as part of the law. This is instituted again. Now, the law primarily deals with the nation of Israel. For the most part, this is what they have to deal with. This is what God instituted with that nation at that time. When you see these first two verses, they play themselves out, and this is part of the guilt that the nation of Israel, or the people at that time, this is part of what they had to deal with. If we turn to Matthew, this is in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. In Matthew, if you remember, towards the end of Jesus' ministry, let's see, I want to be here in 27, I believe it is. So here in Matthew 27, Jesus has been apprehended falsely. He's been falsely accused. And what does it say back here in Exodus 21? You shall not bear a false report. Do not join your hand with a wicked man to be a malicious witness. So when we go to the night in which Jesus was betrayed, when we go through the trials and everything, we see that you have all these counselors who had gathered together, not just to accuse Jesus. They had already condemned him. So they had already joined their hand with the wicked. I don't think that it was just them and their hatred for Jesus. I think this was a supernatural thing that was going on within them. But yeah, it's God doing something and allowing things to play themselves out, because it was going to play a bigger part of it. But what you see is they do join their hands together to do this. And even in verse 4 of 27, you see where after they had apprehended Jesus, Judas says in verse 4 of chapter 27, I have sinned by betraying innocent blood. But they said, what is that to us? See to that yourself. That's when he throws the 30 pieces of silver. And the chief priests take it out and throw it into the field, to the potter's field, just as was foretold. But the other part of this is when it came time for the people, if we go to, let's see, let's go to verse 15. We'll read 15 through 25. And it says, now at the feast of the governor, in chapter 27 of Matthew, now at the feast of the governor was accustomed to release for the multitude any one prisoner whom they wanted. And they were holding at this time a notorious prisoner called Barabbas. When therefore they were all together, Pilate said to them, whom do you want me to release for you? Barabbas, or Jesus, who is called the Christ? For he knew that because of envy they had delivered him up. And while he was sitting on the judgment seat, his wife sent to him, saying, have nothing to do with this righteous man. For last night I suffered greatly in a dream because of him. But the chief priests and the elders persuaded the multitudes. So there's your evil men, and here you have the crowd.
The masses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a direct violation of God's law. And they're instituting it. They're joining with this mob. We see this very thing working itself out. This is why God held them accountable. So the chief priests and the elders and the multitudes of verse 20 to ask for Barabbas and to put Jesus to death. But the governor answered and said to them, which of the two do you want me to release for you? And they said, Barabbas. Pilate said to them, then what shall I do with this Jesus who is called the Christ? Now notice the emphasis.
Mm-hmm.
He's the Messiah. He's trying to provoke them to go, well, maybe we should, rethink this. But it was too late. They had already been worked up. They had already joined their hands to this evil thing. And it says, and he says, why? No, it says, what shall I do with this? They all said, let him be crucified. And he said, why? What evil has he done? But they kept shouting all the more, let him be crucified. And when Pilate saw that he was accomplishing nothing, but rather that a riot was starting. So now it's becoming riotous. They're really breaking the law.
Mm-hmm.
So they're really breaking this commandment big time. And a riot was starting, so he took water and washed his hands in front of the multitude, saying, I am innocent of this man's blood. See to that yourselves. And God held him accountable. More than likely, he is just as guilty because he had the power to do something about it, and he didn't. Mm-hmm. And all the people answered and said, his blood. Now notice all the people. It wasn't just the chief priests and the scribes or the Sadducees or the Pharisees. It was all the people. This is why you don't get caught up in a mob. You get caught up in it, and then you get yourself accosted with, and you get accused of the same thing. They said this, his blood be on us and on our children. They just cursed themselves. On top of a curse, they've asked for a curse.
Yeah. They curse their children.
Yeah. So you'll find that again in Mark, that same in Mark. Let's see. I'm not going to go through it tonight, but I can't remember where it was. It was in Mark 15 and in Luke. Mark 15 and in Luke. Excuse me. Luke 21 or 22, I believe it is. It's where you have the same account of those. So you can search those things out for yourself. But the reason I wanted to show you those things is because there is
Look what?
Luke 21, I believe it is.
It's 22, I think. It's 22 or 23, actually.
Let's see.
Oh yeah, 21, the widows.
And there you have Jesus before Pilate.
Yeah,
and
23.
Oh yeah, it'd be 23. Yeah.
Sorry about the correction.
Yeah. So you have the crowd 13 through 25 is where the verses are in Luke. So those are important things because here you have a reason why God is saying this, and then there's a practical purpose, but there's also a thing that was going to happen, and they joined themselves in this evil deed in crying out for the very Christ himself, for the very Messiah to be killed. The other thing that we would, before we move on here, back in Exodus 23, is the sabbatical year. Now, this is important because how did God look at it and view the sabbatical year, and what's the purpose of it?
Where is the sabbatical? It's not the year of Jubilee.
No. Sabbatical year was 6 years you were to work the land, and on the 7th year you're to give it a rest. Okay? There's a reason why this is in there. And God is looking forward, knowing what was going to happen. But here, it says in verse 10 of Exodus 23, "And you shall sow your land for 6 years, and gather in its yield. But on the 7th year you shall let it rest, and lie fallow, so that the needy of your people may eat, and whatever they leave, the beasts of the field may eat. You are to do the same with your vineyard and your olive groves." In other words, any produce that you're going to grow, for 6 years work it, but on the 7th year you are to let it rest. Don't do anything with it. Don't go out there and send your workers to pick everything clean. It was to help the poor in part of the ways. But here's the biggest purpose, verse 12. 6 days you are to do your work, but on the 7th you shall cease from your labor, in order that your ox and your donkey may rest, and the son of your female slave may rest, and the son of your, as well as your stranger may refresh themselves. Now concerning everything which I have said to you, be on your guard, and do not mention the name of other gods, nor let them be heard from your mouth. So on top of that, don't mention the other gods, and so on and so forth. Well, it was broken. In Daniel. In Daniel chapter 9, which is actually where I'm at reading in my personal reading, Daniel, in the first year of Darius, the son of Ahasuerus, in Daniel chapter 9, he talks about this. And so here there is an acknowledgement for Daniel. The people had been taken. They'd been taken to Babylon, if you remember. Kind of the same thing that Isaiah was talking about. And some of the people had already been taken, and they were going to be there several years. And so the time came about when it says here in the first year, verse 1 of chapter 9, in the first year of Darius, the son of Ahasuerus, the Median descent, who was made king over the kingdom of the Chaldeans being Babylon. Okay? And remember that that's where Abraham came from, that area, the Ur of the Chaldees. So he was Babylonian before it was Babylon. In the first year of his reign, I, Daniel, observed in the books the number of the years which was revealed as the word of the Lord to Jeremiah the prophet, from the completion of the desolations of Jerusalem, namely 70 years. So he recognizes that 70 years was almost up. And what was the 70 years all about? Well, it's part of what God had said, but if in 2 Chronicles, let me write this down so if you guys want to put this on in your notes where you'll find this, the 70 years in Jeremiah, what Daniel is talking about, the 70 years. It's in 2 Chronicles. Oh, come on. I think this board is dirty.
I am going to buy you a new set of.
I've got a whole bunch of them. These ones just,
The board needs to be clean.
yeah. 2 Chronicles. And this is chapter 36. And it is, I'm just going to put 13 through 21. Ooh, it's hot. Very hot.
Everybody else is like, we're not hot.
That's how it is.
Okay, so here's what it reads, starting in verse 13. And he also rebelled against King Nebuchadnezzar. This is speaking about Zedekiah. He rebelled against King Nebuchadnezzar, who had made him swear allegiance by God, but he stiffened his neck and hardened his heart against turning to the Lord God of Israel. Now remember, earlier on in Isaiah, we spent a lot of time going over this, a lot of this history. Furthermore, in verse 14, all the officials of the priests and the people were very unfaithful, following all the abominations of the nations. And they defiled the house of Yahweh, which he had sanctified in Jerusalem. And Yahweh, the God of their fathers, sent word to them again and again by his messengers, because he had compassion on his people and on his dwelling place. But they continually mocked the messengers of God, despised his words, and scoffed at his prophets, until the wrath of the Lord rose against his people, until there was no remedy. Therefore, he brought up against them the king of the Chaldeans, who slew their young men with the sword in the house of their sanctuary, and had no compassion on the young man or virgin, old man or infirm. He gave them all into his hand. And all the articles of the house of God, great and small, and the treasures of the house of the Lord, and the treasures, the king of his officers, he brought them all to Babylon. Then they burned the house of God and broke down the wall of Jerusalem, and burned all of its fortified buildings with fire, and destroyed all its valuable articles. And those who had escaped from the sword he carried away to Babylon, and they were servants to him and to his sons until the rule of the kingdom of Persia. And this is the point here, verse 21, to fulfill the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah, until the land had enjoyed its Sabbaths all the days of its desolation. It kept Sabbath until 70 years were complete. So on top of all the other stuff, this was added to it. They were so rebellious that they didn't even bother to do the seventh year. And this is an important part of the law, because God said this was a reflection of what the days that he set up. 6 years you were to work it, just like 6 days you're to work, and on the seventh day you rest. And so they violated this, and the price that they paid was 70 years of captivity. And it was horrible, as you can read. There was no compassion for women, children, old, infirm, didn't matter. He just laid waste to everything, and the ones that did survive, he took the best of the best. And there were some that got left behind, a remnant that got left behind there. But these are part of the things that work themselves out. Moving on here, going back to Exodus, in the rest of 23 is about the regulations and the national feasts, things that they were all supposed to participate in. And by the way, the national feasts, there were things that Jesus in his time did participate in. And why is that? Why would he have to participate in those things?
He's Jewish.
Okay.
And because he was in
Fulfill all of the law.
And he actually was the fulfillment of the feast.
Yeah, he had to fulfill the law because it's part of the law.
He is the feast.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah.
feast of the Passover.
Yeah, and so he had to participate because he was a young man that had to do this, and he was keeping all the laws, and he did them all. And it was part of what he was supposed to do when he came. Let's see, in the rest of 23, just has to do with when they come to the new land. In verse 20 of chapter 23, he says, "Behold, I'm going to send an angel before you to guard you along the way and to bring you into the place which I have prepared. Be on your guard before him, obey his voice, do not be rebellious towards him, for he will not pardon your transgressions, since my name is in him." So there's something profound going on here. It's not just anyone. It's not just another messenger, another angel. This is somebody who can pardon sin, who can pardon transgression. And he has his name built in him. It's a pre-incarnate, more than likely. It's a pre-incarnate Christ, more than likely here. Chapter 22. "But if you will truly obey his voice and do all that I say, then I will be an enemy to your enemies and an adversary to your adversaries." That's what we want God to be. Right?
Where are we right now? 22?
We're in
23.
chapter 23,
Verse
verse 22.
Chapter 23.
Yes.
Verse 22.
Yeah.
Sorry, we're a little slow.
Hope you turn 2 pages, at least, if not more.
That's why.
Yeah. Yeah, so we're in verse 22 right there I just read. "But if you will truly obey his voice and do all that I say, then I will be an enemy to your enemies and an adversary to your adversaries." And in verse 23, "For my angel will go before you and bring you into the land of the Amorites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Canaanites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, and I will completely destroy them. You shall not worship their gods, nor serve them, nor do according to their deeds, but you shall utterly overthrow them and break their sacred pillars in pieces. But you shall serve the Lord your God. He will bless your bread and your water, and I will remove sickness from your midst. There shall be no one miscarrying or barren in your land. I will fulfill the number of your days. I will send my terror ahead of you." Now these are blessings for being obedient. Okay? I mean, imagine that there is no miscarrying. Get pregnant, you're going to have that kid. Boom. I mean, how much relief would that be to a woman knowing that? There's no way I'm going to lose this kid. That's God's promise. But only if they were obedient, and that there's no one sick. They'll always have bread, and it will be good bread, and they'll always have water, and it'll be good. He says, "I will send my terror," in verse 27, "ahead of you, and throw into confusion all the people among you who come, among who you come." Let me start that again, verse 27. "I will send my terror ahead of you and throw into confusion all the people among whom you come, and I will make all your enemies turn their backs to you." In other words, they're going to turn around and run, right? Mm-hmm. "And I will send hornets ahead of you, that they may drive out the Hivites and the Canaanites and the Hittites and all the other ites. I will not drive them out before you in a single year, that the land may not become desolate, and the beasts of the field become too numerous for you. I will drive them out before you little by little, until you become fruitful and take possession of the land. I will fix your boundary from the Red Sea to the Sea of the Philistines, and from the wilderness of the river Euphrates, for I will deliver the inhabitants of the land into your hand, and you will drive them out before you. You shall make no covenant with them or with their gods." One of the first things they did was make a covenant with one of the peoples. And that was a big mistake. And they lived to regret it. It also says in verse 33, "They shall not live in your land, lest they make you sin against me. For if you serve their gods, I will surely be a snare to you."
So when the people were living in their regular life, they didn't have Bibles and stuff. They had to listen to the priests, right?
Yeah, They had to get the law from somebody that would read it and proclaim it. And they didn't have their own versions like we do. They didn't have 6 Bibles or 10 Bibles and plus a Bible app or 5 Bible apps or whatever. They had to go with what they were being told. And so that was why it was so important.
And they would forget it, then.
Yeah. Yeah, so it was one of those things that they had to be continually reminded. Which, with the time, let's keep going in chapter 24. This is important because of what we just celebrated and commemorated just last week, communion. This is how this covenant at this time was to be ratified, and this is why this is important here. In verse 1 of chapter 24, then he said to Moses, "Come up to the Lord, to Yahweh, you and Aaron, Nadab, Abihu, and the 70 of the elders of Israel, and you shall worship at a distance. Moses alone, however, shall come near to Yahweh, but they shall not come near, nor shall the people come up with him." Then Moses came and recounted to the people all the words of the Lord and all the ordinances, and all the people answered with one voice and said, "All the words which the Lord has spoken we will do." And Moses wrote down all the words of the Lord. Then he arose early in the morning and built an altar at the foot of the mountain with 12 pillars for the 12 tribes of Israel. And he sent young men of the sons of Israel, and they offered burnt offerings and sacrificed young bulls as peace offerings to the Lord. And Moses took half of the blood and put it in basins, and the other half of the blood he sprinkled on the altar. And then he took the book of the covenant and read it in the hearing of the people. And they said, "All that the Lord has spoken we will do, and we will be obedient." So Moses took the blood and sprinkled it on the people and said, "Behold, the blood of the covenant which the Lord has made with you in accordance with all these words." That's why it's important to understand that in the new covenant, the wine that we partake in, the grape juice, that represents the new covenant. And so we don't need to be sprinkled. We're covered in the blood of Christ. So this is a literal sprinkling that blood all over the people. Yeah. And that cleanses you. But remember, the covenant started with the Passover. And that has the sign of the blood. This is just a sign of the blood. And the sign of the blood is still important. It's an important thing. The sign of the blood to us is Jesus shed his blood on the cross. And so the communion that we take in now, the Lord's Supper, that is representative of that blood that we partake in. In other words, we're taking in the blood that he has shed for our sin. So we're having communion with him. Not literally, but it's just symbolic. It's representative of what took place, and representative of this sprinkling. So you're not having to come up before us and we're sprinkling you with blood, and you're going home with spotted clothes.
Have to buy a new outfit every week.
Yeah. So this was important because this is how it's instituted. Here is where it begins. All of the other stuff and all of the things that are given. I want to keep reading a little bit more because he says here in verse 9 through 11, "Then Moses went up to Aaron and Nadab and Abihu and the 70 of the elders of Israel, and they saw the God of Israel. And under his feet there appeared to be a pavement of sapphire as clear as the sky itself." So they saw some kind of a manifestation of God.
Wow, but it says nobody ever saw God.
No, it says nobody ever saw his face.
Oh.
And that's why I wanted to bring it up, because people automatically think that.
Yeah.
And we're always told that. Well, didn't the 70? No, they saw a representation. They saw something, but they didn't see his face. They didn't see, no man can see God in his fullness and live. That's what Jesus himself said. You can't.
So that's where Joseph Smith is full of malarkey.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you cannot see God in his fullness and live.
Yeah.
Unless he's a false
I
God.
just,
Unless he is maybe a devil who's showing himself and coming as an angel of light.
Hmm.
then you could. But God, no way. And here, there's one of the things that's cool is they see this something underneath this representation, this manifestation, that looks like kind of a pavement, but it's clear. And it looks like the sky. Don't know exactly what is going on here, except the fact that God allowed himself in this instance to be seen in part. And then notice what it says in verse 11. Yet he did not stretch out his hands against the nobles of the sons of Israel, and they beheld God, and they ate and drank. Now that's important because this is looking forward to what where we've been already in Isaiah, where he is Emmanuel. He's God with us. And here they are eating and drinking. The picture of the communion right there. It's just kind of amazing that God shows his compassion, his love, his care for his people. And although they didn't come up on the mountains, they were obedient. God revealed himself in some way that they had a partial vision of who he is, or at least a part of his glory. And that's an important thing to understand. And
But
so,
like, he didn't have a human body,
no, it doesn't say that he has a human form.
but it says he has feet.
Under his feet. So,
Where his feet should be or would be.
yeah, I think that's it. They seen something that appeared to be like a throne. So the assumption is there's legs and feet there, but they can't really tell. All they know is underneath it. Notice what the description is. It's really about the pavement, the thing that's underneath him. So it's really not about that, because I don't think that they could focus on that too long.
That
But
would
they
be
were able to focus.
green, right? Sapphire, like
Yeah.
sparkly.
Yeah, it's brilliant. Verse 12, now the Lord said to Moses, come up to me on the mountain and remain there, and I will give you the stone tablets with the law and the commandment which I have written for their instruction. So Moses arose with Joshua his servant, and Moses went up to the mountain of God. But to the elders he said, wait here for us until we return to you. And behold, Aaron and Hur are with you. Whoever has a legal matter, let him approach them. And then Moses went up to the mountain, and the cloud covered the mountain. So Moses goes up by himself, and it says, the glory of the Lord rested on the Mount Sinai. And the cloud covered it for 6 days. And on the seventh day, he called to Moses from the midst of the cloud. So he's up there 7 days. And then all of a sudden God says, hey, Moses, what's up? But one of the things that I wanted to get through before we get done for tonight, the cloud. We talked a little bit about this on Sunday. I mentioned it on Sunday when I was talking about the glory of God in the New Testament that the apostles got to see. And one of the things, this is the same cloud. It's the glory cloud of God. And so when Jesus was up on the mountain with his inner circle, James and John and Peter, that when he was there up on the mountain, he was what's called transfigured. And they got to see something that they'd never seen. So Jesus went up with them as normal. And then these two characters, if you remember from what we were reading on, in fact, we can kind of open to it.
So is it the Shekinah glory? Or is it
Yeah,
a different thing?
it would be similar to that, yeah. Shekinah. It's a transfiguration. So it's the same. It's in Mark. Let's see. I've got this one marked in Mark. It's in Matthew also. We already read out of Matthew, so we'll read out of Mark. Give him a chance here. In Mark chapter 9. In Mark chapter 9, we'll start in verse 1 and read through this real quick. And he was saying to them, truly, truly, I say to you, there are some of those who are standing here who will not taste death until they see the kingdom of God after it has come with power. And 6 days later, Jesus took with him Peter, James, and John, and brought them up to the high mountain by themselves. And he was transfigured before them. and his garments became radiant with exceedingly white, as no launderer on earth can whiten them. So, super brilliant.
And Elijah and Moses.
Yeah. And Elijah appeared to them along with Moses. Now they're spoken of as these people, Elijah and Moses. And Elijah and Moses, just happenstancely, Elijah was translated in a chariot of fire. And I'll let you search that out. Doesn't say that he ever died. It says that he was translated in a chariot of fire. And Moses, if you remember, at the end of the right before the people are gonna cross into the Jordan, as they're going in there, he's up on a mountain all by himself, and nobody knows what happened to him at that point. And it says that
told that he wasn't gonna go in.
he's not gonna go in, and so but he was gonna die on that day, supposedly, or we assume, and then we don't hear from Moses again. Well, we do hear, and they're spoken of. These are not just, this is not just like somebody like Elijah and somebody like Moses.
Didn't the devil want Moses' body or something?
Well, I think either Peter or James talks about that, or Jude, one of the other. One of those three talk about it in their epistle, that they wrestled with Satan for his body. But I think that comes from an extra biblical book, and that's what he was quoting. So, what he meant by that, we're not absolutely sure. But here we do see that it's spoken of directly as Elijah and Moses. And they were talking with Jesus. And Peter answered and said, Jesus, Rabbi, or said to Jesus, Rabbi, it is good for us to be here. And let us make 3 tabernacles, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. For he did not know what to answer, for they became terrified. So he just said something. Yeah. Let's make some tabernacles here. Then a cloud formed, overshadowing them, and a voice came out of the cloud. This is my beloved Son, listen to him. And all at once they looked around and saw no one with them anymore except Jesus alone. The reason I wanted to read this is because that cloud, this is the same cloud. This is the same glory cloud that comes down when God chooses to do so. This is probably what they were seeing, the 70 that saw from a distance, this vision. This is the cloud that is spoken of in Exodus, this glory of God that settles on the mountain. And that's why it's so important to take those little details and understand when we're talking about them here, it's the same type of thing that we're talking about in the Old Testament that attests to what is going on in the New Testament when Jesus came. It's fulfilling all of those things. And it's not a different kind of a cloud. It's the same kind of a deal. Whatever it was, way back in Exodus, it's the same kind of a deal that came to them. And Moses, when we were back here in Exodus, he's in that cloud. For 7 days, nothing. Then all of a sudden, boom, he's being spoken to by God. Come over here where I'm going to do these things.
He just had to sit around in the cloud.
He got to sit around in the cloud. Just chill. In his glory. So
That must have felt pretty good, I bet.
it would be pretty awesome. It would be pretty amazing. It would be pretty mysterious. I mean, it'd be just kind of weird. But the thing that I want to leave with tonight is God in his glory. We're going to talk about this on Sunday. But God in his glory is totally his glory. And it belongs to no one else. And so here, Jesus, the bigger point is this glory is being shared in Jesus. And that's an important thing for us to understand. Because the God who says, I will give my glory to no one, shares it with Jesus. So God will not share his glory with anyone, but he does so with Jesus. What can we conclude logically and rationally?
Was he sharing his glory
Jesus
with?
is going to share that with us.
Yeah.
And he was sharing it with Elijah and Moses too, because they were there,
Or
right?
that they're
Yeah.
one and the same.
Yeah, that's the bigger point.
Yeah.
That Jesus is God. He's God the Son. He's God the Son from all eternity. That's why I was talking about on Sunday about the Trinity and why it's so important for us to understand all of these things and how they fit together. Unlike some apostatizing pastors and teachers now want to disconnect from the Bible and make up their own religion and teach whatever. I don't know. But these things are interwoven. You can't take them apart. You know, it's almost like marriage, what God said and when He instituted it. What I have joined together, let no one tear asunder. Same thing with His Word, the Old and the New Testament. What I've put together for you, do not tear it asunder, let alone try to unhitch from it. But here you see a lot of the same symbolic things and a lot of the same pictures of things that God was and is going to do. And in the future, when Jesus was taken up in the cloud, that's the same cloud, that glory that came and lifted Him up and He ascends into heaven. He's going to come back in the same way. We're going to see Him coming in the cloud. It's that same cloud. It's the same thing. So one of these days, if we're here and alive, we're going to get to see Him. We're going to get to see this cloud. We're going to get to see it if we're alive at His return. We'll get to see it if we die and He comes later, then we get to see it in a whole different way. But we will get to see this cloud eventually. So we will, at one point in time, we won't have to wonder anymore what it is, because we'll actually get to see it. It's amazing. It's just amazing how all these things work together and how we can look forward, look back, and find the hope that we have for the future. It's just amazing how God has set these things up for us so that we can know that we have hope. Questions, comments? If not, we'll just close in prayer and just call it a night. Father, we thank You for Your goodness and Your grace and Your mercy. We thank You for Your word. We thank You for Your giving it to us so that we can know what it is that You have revealed, so that we can know truth, so that we know that You, so we don't go astray, so we don't go wandering off after false gods. Lord, we thank You that it is so clear, and we're dependent upon You to make it clear to us. We're dependent on You to send Your Spirit to quicken us and to make us to understand, or at least to help us to understand. We, in our fallen state, Lord, we don't fully understand or grasp all these things, but we thank You for the things that we can. And we thank You that it's written that that the deep things of You are for us to be able to go after if we so desire, that we can dig in and dive deep. Because there's so many things that are here that we don't even begin to understand. We thank You that You are so immense, so unfathomable, and yet You're like the ocean's depths. They're unfathomable. We can't even measure them, and yet we can just wade in the pools that You leave and find that there's so much there. We thank You that You are that mysterious God who reveals Himself so that we can know You, and we can know You rightly. And we thank You that You send Your Son so that you can quicken us and make us to know who You are, and that He's the exact representation. And that one day we'll see that cloud. We'll see Jesus coming in the clouds. And we thank You, Lord, for all of these things and more. Help us, Lord, to not join our hands with the wicked and to just expose the lies and the misconceptions of who You are. Help us to know and understand that by digging into Your word and seeking Your face. We thank You, Lord, that we can. We bless You. We praise You in Jesus' holy name. Amen. Whew.
You're hot.
Starting to sweat. Face is getting all greasy.
A hot flash.
That's what we were told. I never took it very seriously. I was more interested in
Did you think that?
secular.
Yeah, that I was gonna live on the
No,
star.
no, that God had a body. And he did from the
Reminds me of
body.
Jimmy Swagger. I've seen him preach a few times. He would
They
start
taught that in
sweating.
primary.
He
like,
always had
very
a
young.
hanky.
Yeah.
Sugar
Uh,
bodies.
And
He
you
would
see
use
the
that same
signs
hanky
there,
over and
the
over, you know, to
doors,
wipe his face off.
You want
I
to-
grew up
Sorry,
singing
what?
on
They had a
we
lot
sang
of
it
lights
on my
on
mission.
them.
The co-op song?
On the mission where
A
I
lot
sang
of lights
I
on
don't
them.
know. Highway to co-op or high field. What is it?
I'm like,
Huh?
I thought it was called high.
I thought you were gonna say highway to hell.
Might as well. What is it? Wait, there's
It
like
was
that's
high
the
to
name of the
co-op.
town, right?
well, from the sound of
Oh,
it,
yeah,
that
did you
might
pause that?
be what it is.
No. No.